and experience.
Thank you.
I was leaving an exercise class.
All of a sudden, the pain.
My entire
Shortness of breath, very fatigued.
nauseated.
Thought that it was nothing much, maybe just stress.
You're having a heart attack.
I'm healthy, I'm young. There's no way it could be.
Go get checked.
Heart disease is the #1 killer in women.
redforwomen.org to learn a woman's risk for heart disease.
You're listening to Achieve.com, the positive side of broadcasting.
Your host and vessel of spirit is Nancy Zilversmit. We hope that you will learn to have the strength and courage of spirit and to leave the old beliefs that hold you down behind. Hello, it's May 15th, 2015, and www.sanctuaryofsacredspace.com Classic Tarot class starting on Tuesday, May the 19th. It's my home. You are welcome to register for it on the website or be pre-registered. Shoot me an email at nancy@sanctuaryofsacredspace.com and I will give you more information as it is classic tarot. And we learn a lot versal and straight up. You have 78 cards. You learn at least 156 meanings, but there are more because you do learn the symbolism as well as the meanings. And we try and make it easy for you. Have any interest in that class, please shoot me an email, or you can catch me for Nancy Zilversmit. Okay. This week we're going to talk about energy of courage, and we're going to talk about what courage is, what it's different religions by different philosophers and different people over the years, and we'll look used. It was something else entirely different. And before we get into that, we've got a few things that happened in the news this week. The Pew report came out yesterday, and it said the number of Americans who identify as Christians has fallen nearly 8% in only 7 years. The Pew Research Center found that 71% of Americans identify as Christian in 2014, was down from 78% in 2007. In that same period, those identifying as having no religion grew from 16% to 23%. So it means that there are 56 million Americans who do not observe. The second largest community after that are the evangelicals. So no religion, then evangelicals. In the United States remains home to more Christians than any other nation, roughly 7 in 10, continuing to identify with some branch of Christianity. A religious landscape study that was done over a period of 7 years, interviewing 35 people. Losses were mainly amongst the liberal Protestants and Catholics and occurring in all regions of the U.S. among all ages and demographics. And wow, just continue about a couple of other things that are going on with the Catholic Church. Yesterday it came out that Pope Francis welcomed Raul Castro from Cuba to the Vatican, and they had a discussion, and Raul Castro, he was so impressed by the pontiff, he was considering returning to the Catholic Church himself. And Francis welcomed him in his native Spanish, and Castro was taken into an audience hall, and the Cuban president, bowing his head, gripped Francis' hands with both his, and the two began private talks. Francis will visit Cuba in the United States, and after leaving the Vatican, Castro, who was the revolutionary leader who brought communism to power in Cuba, gushed with praise for France. Is a Jesuit And I, in some way, am too. Castro said at the news conference, I always studied at Jesuit schools. When the Pope goes to Cuba in September, I promise to go to all of his masses. We'll see if that happens. And he, and if the Pope continues this way, I have read all his speeches, all his commentaries. If he continues this way, I will go back to praying and go back to the church. And I'm not joking. He says it was a startling assertion from the leader of the communist country. In the past, has drawn a sharp Vatican criticism. Castro said, I am from a Cuban Communist Party that believers, but now that we are allowing it, it is an important step. So, speaks very impressed by his wisdom, his modesty, all his virtues that we know he has. Pope Francis for helping helping to bring Havana and Washington closer together after decades of U.S. government policy and strict. The Pope was instrumental in that, getting Cuba and the United States back together again. And he says he hopes that his country will quickly the Senate. This one came from the chief exorcist, warning that the practice of yoga is satanic. And so he's the successor to Father Gabriel, and who was the Vatican's former chief exorcist for 25 years. And he's come out to say in the condemnation of fantasy novels and yoga. Against fantasy novels. Oh, well, that would put a whole lot of authors out of business, but you know what? They're going to keep writing anyway. He declared that both of these were the cause of demonic possession. And he was explaining that the Catholic Church has seen a steady uptick of reports of demonic possession all over the world, and that popular cultural pastimes like Harry Potter novels and in engaging in the vinyasa are largely to blame. So they say that a lot of modern TV shows, movies, and novels are glorifying demonic creatures such as vampires and magical wizards. And they are leading the young and the old alike to entertain certain activities that are summoning satanic spirits. Demonic possession has been in the upswing for many years, as a matter of fact, not just since these items came out, not since we've had True Blood and the Vampire Diaries and Supernatural on TV. It's been on the upswing for a long time. Or has it? Because it was not publicly announced how many exorcists they actually needed until about 10 years ago, when they finally started admitting that they needed to get more people to become exorcists. So they are literally trying to scare people into giving up their pastimes. But the problem with that is, even though I was brought up with a lot of horror films, and this was back in the 50s and 60s and the 70s, and there were a lot of that going on back then. There was a lot of fiction, science fiction. There was a lot of horror movies and science fiction films. And did the Vatican say anything at that time? No, they did not. Just as many then as there are now. A little more gory now, unless you were watching the old Hammer films, which they were extremely gory. But anyway, going on with the article, they're saying that these things that are trying to turn people into vampires and drink other people's blood and encourage them to have special sexual relations to obtain special powers. They are also groups are attracted to so-called beautiful young vampires that we've seen so much in recent years. Yeah, vampires of old were not beautiful. They were considered handsome or seductive, but they weren't necessarily beautiful. We just use different terms for them nowadays. Anyway, they're questioning the fact that yoga is worshiping the Hindu gods. And, or, is it engaging in stretching and exercising? I've done yoga myself. Yes, there's a lot of stretching, there's a lot of exercising. You can involve spirit with you if you want, but not as calling in this god or calling in that god, or changing in, who's to be with you spiritually during yoga. Yes, I get spirit that does come in, and sometimes it's the divine, sometimes it's source, the ones the Catholics call God. So it just depends. Calling in demonic spirits. I'm not possessed by demonic spirits. But I do yoga, and I do Tai Chi, and it is a lot of stretching, and it's basically a physical exercise, and it is for flexibility, for balance. They're against that kind of thing. They're saying that also that only and physical exercise, which you can go to a gym and do a lot of other things for that, but yoga is very popular. The well-being, such as your core strength and better circulation, reducing stress. Oh, by the way, that's another thing. The list goes on for at least 80 pages. I've mentioned this several times over the years. And you can go on the Vatican website and really search for it to find it. What they do or do not believe in, as far as a lot of what's out there, chiropractors, acupuncture, yoga, Tai Chi, all of these, they consider them all satanic. So that they see it that it's just leading to evil, and they say that the things like Harry Potter has been around for years. It's leading people to evil, and in order to deal with the circumstances of this, Catholic religion is trying to bring on an additional 6 exorcists. Only 6? Okay, only 6. I think you need more than that. We can't get to you. Let's see. And they're bringing they might be bringing in a total. That's their belief on that. I say that some of the demand for exorcism now is because people are just being brave enough to come forward. Not just as two, but that's basically because it's been in the news. People have been talking about it. Some people are not afraid anymore that they need to get help, and they've tried to have been denied there. So and I do exorcisms, and training was hard, and it was training directly from spirit. So experience, hands-on, a little different from book learning. Okay. Let's see, we're going on again this week. We have one more week yet. And we talk about a lot of things. They journal about their spiritual gifts every week, and they're on. And one lady was going through her journal, and she said, "Oh yeah, and I have these tattoos," and I'm just like, okay. And but her beliefs go a little bit beyond that. And she says they strike up conversations with me, and they ask me about my spiritual tattoos, and that opens the door to talk about spiritual matters. And one in the class, she says, "Well, I don't have any tattoos other than my eyebrows and my eyeliner." And I looked at really couldn't, and told her, yes, I also have the eyeliner and the eyebrows done. So the same, they all said, we all have, and there wasn't a lady in the class that didn't have it done. So different types of tattoos, some you don't see, and they're just not as obvious, and some you do, and they strike up conversations. I have spiritual ones on my arms as well. It opens conversations for spirituality and religion and such, but that's not why I got them. And then we had one of the men in the classroom, and he's pulling up his sleeve, and he's going, "Oh, look, I have a tattoo on my arm." And we're going, "Yeah, dude, okay." Yeah, that didn't hurt. Have it done on your eyes, okay, on your eyelids. Okay, so moving on. In order to have courage has an opposite. The opposite of courage is fear. So in order to have courage, you have to overcome some fear. And fear is the negative energy. It's usually a misunderstanding of the world around you. Is your fear just a world that's justified, or is it an illusion? Okay, is it an illusion? And usually fear stems from something in the past, but when you're walking into your life, fear, the imagined future, it may or may not be a real fear, and most of the time it isn't. And we make out things to be more than that they really are when we have fear and won't do certain things. It's just like, I won't go there because I'm afraid this or this and this is going to happen. And we discussed that in the Gifts of Spirit class this last week too about fear. But courage energy. What you're doing when you have courage, you're taking fear and you're setting it aside in the moment, and in the moment to moment in the aspects of your daily life. You wouldn't believe how many fears a person can have in one day, and if you're living moment to moment and you're to those fears, your life, there's actually a lot there. There's a lot there. Also, when faced with fear, sometimes it's a spiritual weakness as well. And sometimes we just call that doubt. And doubt is a spiritual weakness. And if you take a look deeper, find new communities, if you ask questions, take a risk, expose yourself to humiliation sometimes, you have to do that, or physical danger. I know that years ago, and it was a non-spiritual thing, but years ago I was on a committee that was making these calendars. We were operating actually in the red, and it was a nonprofit, and they put it before the board of people who actually put the calendars together. I mean, we selected the pictures, we actually designed it, we went through the whole printing, we went from the concept to the final, and that for 5 years. And they came to us, the nonprofit came to us and basically said, we want to know what the board has to say. And the rest of the board, of course, they are thinking with their heart instead of their head. And it's just like they're wanting to continue wanting and all this other stuff. And it's just like I was the only dissenting vote as far as the board went. And I went, look, if this was run by like a regular business instead of a nonprofit, if this was run like a regular business and you take into account the cost versus the losses, this would not happen another year. And I was not well liked by the board, but I'll tell you what the decision was of the nonprofit. Continue that was already pre-made and pre-set up, and actually sold for less than what they were having to produce it. So it's sometimes you have to take a stand. You have to have the courage to be the one that's the dissenting voice, and especially if you know that you're right in what you are having to say. So we're going to go to the definitions of courage from the Webster's 1851 dictionary, which I own. It's the second edition of heart, bravery, and the quality of mind that enables you to, when in danger and difficulty, with firmness of spirits, valor, boldness, resolution. It is part of fortitude, but fortitude implies patience to bear continued suffering. We'll get into the fortitude piece a little. Change over the years. In the modern dictionary, courage is the ability and a willingness to confront fear, pain, danger, of uncertainty, and intimidation. Courage in the face of physical pain, hardship, death, threat, or moral courage that is the ability to act rightly in the face of the popular opposition, shame, scandal, or discouragement. In heart and spirit. That's what courage means, heart and spirit. It's something that exists in the core of your being and standing up for your heartfelt values. We're going to look at 3 types of courage before we get into some of the historical stuff on it. And the 3 types of courage are facing death. And second type is facing despair of loss of connection. The third is facing the arising of the negative in our moment-to-moment lives. That's the one that we just day to day. It's like if you have bills that you owe and you don't want to answer that phone because you're afraid that you're going to get threatened. Well, you know what? Those threats are illegal for them to do in the first place. You need to know. So, anyway, fears, face them. especially the ones in your day-to-day life. Face those fears and work through them, get over them. So what these three things do is when you have courage and these developing a deeper level of energy. And that from that deeper level of energy, you're drawing that up through the heart to walk forward with it. And some choose a career path that requires daily courage. Those who are in the military, those who are in law enforcement, those who are firemen, those are just a few. And they have to pull up their courage day to day. And they have to go through specialized training, and they go through practice, and they develop that courage, and they learn there's a right way and a wrong way to do something. And it's constantly evolving, because as they find when they get into situations that things come up that weren't in the training, so they have to make a call on what they're going to do about it. And when they make that call, sometimes it's a good call, sometimes in the news nowadays of how police are making decisions to do the media too. You're seeing a few negative things that are out there in the media, but when the police do something good, are we seeing that as well? No, we're not. And the same thing goes with the firemen. We don't hear too much about the firemen in the news. And we should hear more about the positive things that happen. Also, we tend to hear a lot of the negative stuff, but there's a lot of positive going on out there as well. And we could learn some lessons from the training that these people have. We should be using some of the lessons that they're using on their job in our daily life. Reading up biographies and going and looking into the legal situations that happened, and taking a look at, was it a good outcome? Was it a bad outcome? Is there something you can learn from that? So practice that you need to take a look at, even for your own daily life. The next one is fear, pain, mental anguish, separation, caused either by bad choices or forces beyond your control. A lot of people make bad choices in their life, and fear. And it's just like, do they have the courage to change that? Do they have the courage to change the forces beyond their control? Basically, they call cultural or environmental, and the how you were raised and where you came from, and the influences around you. And you know what? There have been a few people that have come up out through that and gone on and led good, successful lives. You don't have to be controlled by that forever. You can change it. It takes courage, and you have to go through a personal crossroads with that. You're standing at the crossroad. Which way are you going to go? What is your choice? Which door? What number? Where are you going to step through? Are you going to take the path less traveled? What are you going to do with that? So it's a crossroad in your life. And it is where we ask ourselves, can we gather strength to make a new beginning? And you really have to take a good look at yourself. Can you make a new beginning? And then you have to take the step forward. You have to take the step forward into your courage. And you've got to ask yourself, can I do that? Am I strong enough to do that? And we'll get back to strength later, but it does. And the third thing, practice of each moment as a refinement of energy through the daily life. Everything is energy, and we're pulling up from the energy of our inner core, from the energy from our heart, the energy from our physical and our spiritual being. We are pulling up that energy, and we have to refine that energy. If we are full of fear and negative energy, you have to take a good look through things, and that means you have to refine that energy. You have to turn that energy from fear to courage, and it's in the daily life of situations and experiences, pushing past your fears and making a productive life. Everyone can do that, but not everyone will. Some people are stuck. They don't want to change. More downtrodden, more fearful if they take that step forward. They don't have that courage. And what they need to do is take an attitude check. They need to take a reality check. They got to change up from that inner core. And some people just won't do it. Okay, we have to know our fears and we have to face them. That we know that they're there. We have fears, we have weaknesses. Then you have to know that you've got them, accept them, and then take appropriate actions when necessary to get through your fears. And sometimes getting out of bed, getting dressed, and stepping out the door, and going through the day, being around people. There's some real people. So courage can be confronting. Sometimes it's not a physical thing that you're afraid of. Sometimes it's just long-held beliefs. Sometimes it's attitudes and things that you grew up with, things that you were trained to have those attitudes towards things. But after you've taken a good look at what you've got going on and your fears and your weaknesses, beliefs and our attitudes have a lot of fear in them. A lot of fear, and we need to transform them through courage and make the changes in them. Engage issues instead of avoiding them. That means if something is not right, if it's saying a kind word or helping a person that's down, and not being afraid to do that, to be the one that's going to do it. It's a small thing maybe, but to the helping it changes, and sometimes it tests your faith. Sometimes it making that one little leap of faith. Mark Twain said, "The courage of resistance of fear, mastery of fear, is not still have the fear if you took the step forward, the courage to get through it. You are resisting fear and go through it." We're going to look a little at the antiquity. It went back to other names before it was called courage. And in ancient Greek philosophy, it was fortitude, courage. Those were kind of interchangeable. And as one of the four cardinal virtues, along with prudence, justice, and temperance, it's pivotal. It's one of the four cardinal virtues, and they called it fortitude, prudence, justice, and temperance. And the one developed, and to have any one of those is to possess the ability, the virtue, that they must be able to sustain it in the face of difficulty. So if you had any one of those virtues, and you could sustain, it later developed into the word courage. The early Greek philosopher, be viewed by future philosophers. In his early writings, he had a discussion on it, but failed to have a satisfactory conclusion as to what exactly it was. Nowadays, we have these dictionary definitions. And back in the day of Plato, he did not have a clear conclusion as to what it was. And it shows that he had influence from his teachers like Socrates. Socrates was one of his teachers. So in his later Public is what the name of the writing was, he gives more concrete ideas as to what he believes courage to be. And civic courage was described as a sort of perseverance. And it's the perseverance that by the law, through education, about the things and sort of things that are feared. So he explains this perseverance as an ability to persevere through all emotions like suffering, pleasure. Don't have the courage to leave the pleasure stuff behind too, and that leaving it, and it sometimes causes suffering. So these things all kind of tie in together. So Aristotle, he discussed it broadly, and said that there's an excess of recklessness. He called courage recklessness, and in ancient it was formed as part of the universal virtue of virtuous, and they had their own. So courage was considered to be a they said that a virtue is a habit of mind. This is now we've gone to the Romans from the Greek. They say it's a habit of mind in harmony with reason of any and in the order of nature. Okay, this is pre-Christianity, in the order of nature, and it difference. So there's a little change there. We move medieval time, and we okay, so they've firmly been around for a long time. They've got their foot out there, and they also consider borrow be cardinal virtues, and they have prudence ranking first, justice second, fortitude third, temperance fourth, and after these came other virtues. And Thomas Aquinas taken in two ways. First, as simply denoting a certain firmness of mind, and in this sense, virtue. It is requisite for every virtue to act firmly and immovably. And second, fortitude must be taken to denote firmness only in bearing and withstanding of those things which are difficult to be firm, and namely grave danger, a difficult situation in which to be firm, and he holds fortitude or courage as the primary about endurance. As we go, Christianity, as it continues to go forward, fortitude is to real Christian virtues. So it went up through paganism into Christianity. They borrowed them, they used them, said that they can only be exemplified by the presence of Christian virtues, which are faith, hope, and love. And it takes someone who displays the virtues of faith, hope, and love. Wasn't required before, but when Christianity got a hold of it, they required these things, which is a natural virtue, they say, and that St. Augustine did not consider it as a virtue. Okay, considers courage a virtue through Christian virtue of love, and only through love and charity. So that even they had a little bit of an argument as to what it was about. And if we go to the ability to be brave, one courage with audacity will die. One of courage but gentle spares death. From these two kinds of courage arise harm and benefit. So they still acknowledge that courage has two sides to it, and And it can also have, if you look at that, and we look under the Dharma, under the Hindu movement, they also take a good look at forgiveness, tolerance, honesty, physical restraint, not as being tied on, and cleanliness, perceptiveness, knowledge, truthfulness, and control of anger. These require courage, but not only courage to go through that. And in Islam, they present courage as self-control as a key factor of facing the devil, and in some cases, jihad to a lesser extent. That this, because of courage, through peace and patience, the prophets of the past displayed against people, they take into us that around, depending on what form of Islam are looking at nowadays. So courage in the modern world can be prudence and temperance, as well as the virtues of men. We're a little bit more modern, and it has positive and negative effects on society depending on how you are using your courage and what the outcome of that courage. It could have positive effects on the soul, since the soul, when elevated with joy and courage in a manner, seeks opposition, and it throws into any scene which meets with matter to nourish and employ itself. So your soul can encourage and employ itself through courage. And some people look for it. Ernest Hemingway defined courage as grace under pressure. Version of it, courage is a rightly esteemed the first human qualities because it is the quality that guarantees all others. And we look at Maya Angelou, and she said virtues in this day and age. Because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, which means inconsistently, but nothing consistently without courage. And let's see. Oh, we have Delmar Schwartz, form of courage. Courage is the most desperate. And so we're going to take a look at society and symbolism real quick. And it's the symbolism of courage has been a lion for many decades, and also several hundred years. You'll see the lion in the the shields of the nobility in lions for fortitude, being depicted as a ferocious lion, which is courage. And even in the tarot cards nowadays, the trump card is called strength, and it's a woman. Excuse me, it's a woman petting a lion, and we call that the strength card. But it's also strength and the courage, and it's love conquers all is the spiritual message for that card. Love conquers all, and so you have to have the courage and the love to conquer all, which gives you also the strength. Sometimes it's seen in the Catholic Church as a depiction of Christ's triumph over sin. It's also the symbol in some cultures as a savior of the people who will live in the community with sin and corruption. Associations in popular culture between courage and masculinity in modern culture as having balls or cojones, depending on how you're using that. And I've heard a lot of people in so courage is exhibiting a great strength, inner strength or outer strength, and showing that in emergency situations of social injustice, and mental stamina, and to act. There are several other little pieces in modern views of courage is being able to feel the fear, yet to choose to act in the face of fear, and it's can a man still be brave if he isn't? I worked in movies, theater, and stage work, and a long time ago I met, I think it was George Lindsay. Yeah, George Lindsay on the old Andy Mayberry series, and he was, this was post that series. That series was long over, and he was still making a living, and he said that, and I talked to him. I was working backstage at the time, and he found out that I was also working in theater and doing theater, and he sat down and he talked to me. He was a real nice man, and he was wearing glasses, and he's a Shakespearean actor. And then when I got cast into the role of Goober in Andy of Mayberry, and he said, that stuck. That's the thing that audiences wanted, and that stuck. And he says, right now I'm coming out and fronting some other famous person that night, and he was the opening act. So he says, as you see, I have glasses on. And he also had a fear, but he had the courage to go out and do what he do. He said, wore glasses also. He said, take the glasses off before you go out on stage. You don't have to look at the people. And just be able to get over the fear. He says, every night I go out, I still have off the glasses, put them in my pocket, and go out and do what I have to do. And somebody afraid before there's something seriously wrong with him. So, so can a man still be brave if he's afraid? Yes, a man can be afraid, and be acting bravely, going out and actually doing something. So, yes, and that is a time when a man, it was also quoted in the Game of Thrones, the fear. I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. Not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. And that was Nelson. That there is no living thing that is not afraid when it faces danger. Courage is facing, and that was out of The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Wrote that. So we find it even in, we find it in fiction, we find it in nonfiction, we find it in our daily lives. And that's another thing. The Vatican was books, but if you take a look at that, there was a lot of fear and overcoming fear and having the courage to move. And even sometimes those who weren't on the right side faced fears as well. So there's a lot to fear and courage, and that they're being opposites. They're the brothers of each other. Being terrified and going ahead and doing what must be done, that's courage. The one who feels no fear is a fool, and the one who lets fear rule him is a coward. That's Pierce Anthony. There can be no courage unless you are scared. Have the courage to act instead of react. Oliver Wendell Holmes. Do is follow your heart. When you follow your heart, you have courage. And sometimes when you follow your heart, you may be going in one direction and everybody else is going in the other direction because of what they told to do. It's like a person who is not happy in a 9 to 5 treadmill, running the treadmill, and decides they're going to get off the treadmill, go follow their passion. Go follow their passion. And you see people that are leaving 6-figure jobs to go follow their passion. Recently saw some documentaries up on Netflix, actually, where they have a lot of food documentaries, and they have one about farmers that the young jobs to go and follow their passion. They want to grow things, and the ones that were successful. Then what makes us do extraordinary things? To discover, to challenge ourselves. Passion is and should always be the heart of courage. And I'm going to probably massacre this guy's name, Midori Kamasu. And the next one is the most important thing, is have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Steve Jobs. Lose one's footing momentarily. To not dare is to lose oneself. That's another name I'll probably massacre. Soren Kierkegaard. It takes courage to endure the sharp pains of self-discovery rather than to choose business that would last the rest of our lives. Marianne Williamson. Moving on. Stand up for what is right. This is another type of courage, standing up for what is right and speaking your mind. Voice shake. She's a social activist. And from caring comes courage. Anger is the prelude to courage. Eric Hoffner. So, moving on, expanding your horizons, letting go of the familiar. A lot of people have problems with change, and that's what expanding your horizons, unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore, which means you have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to step forward into the unknown. You have to challenge. And this world demands the qualities of youth, not a time of life, but a state of mind, a temper of the will, a quality of the imagination, a predominance of courage over timidity, of the appetite for adventure over the life of ease. Robert Kennedy. This is another form of courage. People don't like to think about this one, the facing peace. We have a lot of people in this day and age that suffer from things other people can't see. We call it the invisible diseases, illness. Sometimes cancer, you can't tell to look at a person that they have cancer, especially in the earlier stages, and they've already been given a death. Suffering with dignity or faith. There is no need to be ashamed of tears, for tears bear witness. It says Frank. But that might mean Anne Frank, but they didn't give the first name here. The ideal man bears the accidents of life with dignity and grace, making the best. Also a man of faith, Marcus Tullius Sergio. So, the energy of courage, and courage being fear. So fear and courage. Take a good look at what you have going on in your life, your dating. Take one thing at a time as it comes. Don't be afraid to have an emotional meltdown in order to get through the fear and get through what comes with it. Get through it. Get up. Don't live in the fear. Don't curl up and into the deepest part of your heart, your soul, your core being, and look at what's there. Gather your strength. There is strength buried under all of that. And if you need to get help, get it from somebody else. I mean, if it's a spiritual advisor, a medical advisor, a therapist of some sort, a friend, a relative, whoever it is, the step, have enough courage to get up and start moving, get the help to do it, and person to do something, to gather courage. And sometimes people, when they have that, gather within themselves the courage that they didn't know they had or thought that they had lost somewhere along the way, and regain that courage, dig it up, dig it out. Don't let fear stop you. Talk it out with other people. Talk it out with other people about your fears. And sometimes I find when I teach classes sometimes that people have fears and they talk about their fears in classes. We do a lot of sharing classes, and I have people journal sometimes in some of the classes. And I ask them, what's going on? Well, I'm afraid to do this or that. And then we discuss that fear. And we do it without prejudice, without judgment. And we talk what to do about it and where they would like to go with that. And then other people open up and they share theirs as well. Comical. I mean, we take a look at it, and then another person will give the point of view of their fear. Then they'll look at each other and they'll laugh about it, and they're going, what were we so afraid of? Because they would give their different versions of it, and then they get together and they make suggestions. Basically moderate. You basically moderate and give alternate suggestions on top of it. And a lot of times people can work it themselves, a company of others that are giving a sympathetic ear and also bringing forth. And I find that healing and courage come a lot from within yourself. Okay, I think that's all we're going to talk about this week. And next week I will see you on Wednesday. And out there, listen to the archives. This is Nancy Zilversmit and Outside the Box.